Hi, Misha here. And in 2020, when it comes to CZ 223 5.56 guns, everyone's talking about the Bren 2 MS. And as you know, Jay and I are big fans. But it all started for us back in 2015 with the original CZ 805 Bren PS1 Pistol, and then later in 2016 when it came out, the S1 Carbine, both in 223 5.56 NATO. So with everyone focused on the new fancy 2, I didn't want people to forget about the original 805, so I thought it would be fun to kind of do some unknown features and secrets and maybe misconceptions about the original 805. For example, did you know that this rifle actually predates the FN SCAR? Did you know that more 805 Brens have seen military service than the SCAR Light? Did you know this was Czechoslovakia and Czech Republic's first new military rifle in over 50 years when it was adopted? And that it's still the standard in the Czech Army today in 2020? Yeah, there's all kinds of weird little things about the gun. So with that, I've laid out both models here. Essentially, the only difference between the S1 Carbine and the PS1 Pistol is barrel length. The pistol has what they call an 11-inch barrel. It's actually 10.9 inches. And the Carbine comes originally with a 16.1-inch barrel. Although I put an original 14-inch, as they call it, it's actually 14.2-inch barrel in it. And I've also modified my gun with the Magwell and other things to make a replica. So I thought I would talk about really why I made my gun perhaps less effective, at least in the eyes of some. So with that, let's just kind of dive in and chat about the original 805. So yeah, a lot of people call this an FN SCAR clone. And that's not really 100% true at all. And I said this dates back quite a ways. Well, the Czechs really loved their VZ58, and I don't blame them. It's a great rifle. Started to come into service in the very late 1950s, was in full service by the 60s. And it would not be actually until the Bren was formally adopted in 2011 that it was replaced. So, over 50 years of active combat use. But it fired 7.62 by 39, and the Soviets really wanted everyone to start going to their new fancy 5.45. Now, Czechoslovakia was forced to adopt 7.62 25 Tokarev for the VZ52 pistol, when originally the pistol had been designed for 9mm parabellum. But they had to, so they did, and the pistol was not great. They wanted to replace it very early on, but didn't have the money. So when it came time for the 9x18 Makarov cartridge, the Czechs resisted for as long as they could, eventually having to adopt one in it as the VZ82, arguably one of the best Makarov chambered guns ever made. Similarly, the 5.45. Now, they started the program to develop a 5.45 gun in 1977, which was codenamed LADA, L-A-D-A. And it was led at CZ's Brno factory, Brunn, by Fischer. And by 1984, they had an initial design proposal ready. They had 3 lengths of barrel, 3 styles, kind of a submachine gun, a carbine/rifle, and a light machine gun. Whereas the VZ-58 had been truly its own design, the Lada design really looked like an AK-74 and an Israeli Galil had a baby. You can check it out. It's very AK, but it still has some unique twists. So the design was approved, and they went into advanced prototype making, testing, blah, 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 blah. By 1987, several prototypes were done. They were tested, changed a bit, retested, changed a bit, and then in 1989 it was decided it was finally ready for full-scale production and adoption. And in 1990, initially the Army was going to order up to 300,000 of the new system in 5.45 by 39. However, that was when communism was falling apart. So, funding was cut. It never happened. In 1993, Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Following that, CZ went from being state-owned back to being a private company in the 90s. And so it looked to be dead. But so how does that, an AK-74, connect to this here? Well, in 1991 or so, Seller and Bellot began manufacturing 5.56 NATO ammunition in Czechoslovakia, later Czech Republic. On top of that, like many former Warsaw Pact nations, they wanted to join NATO. And so in the late 90s, after kind of reorganizing, they restarted the Lada program. And so they took the AK-74 type gun and essentially rechambered it for 5.56, much like was done in Poland and Bulgaria, Romania, pretty much everywhere. Internally, this started to be known as the 805. Now, for public marketing purposes, they showed it off as the CZ-2000, and there was a variant known as the CZ-2003. They tried shopping it to the military, who, again, was wanting to join NATO, so they thought about having a new thing. They didn't buy. Cool. Instead, the military decided they would upgrade in phases, starting with buying some Bushmaster M4s to equip special forces. They even thought about buying a license to manufacture the M16 and M4 from Colt, but never did. So they were clearly on that more AR path, kind of getting away from AK. Keep in mind, Czechoslovakia never used the AK, and they never actually adopted the 5.45. So they were going to go straight from the VZ-58 and 7.6239 to something more AR, modern-like in 2.23. This is where this comes in here. In the late 90s, a Czech inventor, Mr. von der Rack, approached CZ with a proposal for a very modular system known as the LCZ. This didn't go anywhere, but they remembered him. So in 2005, when they were kind of shaking things up, when they realized that the military was not interested in what they were cooking, they decided to go back and start over. They actually hired Mr. von der Rack to work for them as an outside consultant because he had experience with modular designs and was just kind of fresh thinking. And so within a year, they had a prototype ready. Now initially it was known as the CZ XX, but very quickly it was known internally as the S805, kind of using the old name. And in 2006, after just a year, they had a concept and even a somewhat working prototype ready that they showed to the Czech Army Chief of Staff. He didn't say it was bad, but at that time funding was still limited, and so nothing really happened. That didn't stop CZ though. They refined the design further and started showing it off at trade shows late that year and through 2007 and 2008. Unfortunately, Mr. von der Eyck died suddenly, so The project could have died right then and there, but others at CZ took over and refined what he had started. And thus, when the Czech military finally announced trials for a new gun in 2009, CZ had something that was pretty well evolved and adapted, ready to go. So, the design. Originally, this metal receiver here was an interim prototype made of machined modern alloy. It was actually meant to be transitioned over into polymer, with just metal where needed. But frankly, it worked well enough for them. They just decided to keep the receiver as it is. So the gun did end up weighing more than you might expect. However, really its weight has been a little bit exaggerated. Is it light? No. It weighs just under 8 pounds as is. However, let's put that into perspective. The FN SCAR, which again it's most commonly compared to, with the same 14 or so barrel length, weighs about 7.2 to 7.3 pounds naked. So the SCAR is a little over half pound lighter. And many people consider the SCAR to be a light gun. Interestingly, the magazines and the trigger group these used are components carried over from the Lada, at least the late stage versions of the Lada. These typically had a safe single 2-round and full auto trigger pack, so it is a unique trigger system, kind of derived loosely from the AK. As for the magazines, G36E. Here's a Czech mag pouch that holds 2, very modern nylon style. These are 30 rounds, translucent, and are one of the elements carried over and adapted from the original Lada, the AK-74. Very good mags. And as is quite famously known, the gun will actually also feed from Heckler & Koch German HK G36 mags. That's kind of a coincidence in a way, because these mags too have a bit of an origin point with AKs, because East Germany too had the AK-74. So when they designed the G36, they kind of used a little bit of the mag inspiration from that, and or the Swiss SIG 550, which itself was inspired by the AK. So even though they both are interchangeable, they both kind of have a bit of a AK roots. I don't know, find that interesting. As for the NATO Magwells, like here, this was always meant to be a modular design, and the lower is 2 halves, the rear trigger pistol grip, and the front magwell, and they're just dovetailed together. Because initially they had 2 basic frames. The A frame for the 805 was to support 5.56 and 7.62, 39, and maybe other intermediate cartridge if needed. The B frame was to support larger cartridges like 7.62 NATO, or even 300 Win Mag, or I don't know, whatever. As for comparisons with the Scar first really started to appear in 2004 in early prototypes, and was put into production by 2009 in service. The thing is, to a lot of extent, it's kind of mutual inspiration, because both were inspired by the AR-18, specifically the gas piston, the short stroke gas piston system. It's very AR-18 modified, modernized style. And both have multi-lug rotating bolts, but it's kind of hard to say that's specifically unique to the Scar when so many designers have it. Same goes for having a monolithic top pick rail and bottom pick rail built in. That was just something most guns were going to in the 21st century. Now, did they look at the Scar and say, hey, that's a neat idea? Sure, I'm sure. But their design was already, at least into the prototype stage, before they probably had that happen. Who knows? Lost to time. By 2009, the trials started, and initially the Czech military looked at 27 different designs. And this was quickly down-selected to the FN Scar L and the CZ 805. They dropped the B model, and then they actually ended up dropping the 7.62-39 support, just going to 5.56, because that's just what the military wanted. They also dropped some of the barrel lengths, bringing it back down to just two options, a 14-inch for a quote-unquote rifle, and an 11-inch for a carbine. They also worked with optics company Miopta and others to develop new optics and grenade launchers, all kinds of new kit for these. And of course, Celler and Bellot was instrumental in the ammunition. Well, in March of 2010, the Czech government announced that the CZ 805 Bren, as it was known, had been selected. And interestingly, FN did not contest this result, so it just kind of went ahead. Now, did they go with it because it was made there? Yeah, honestly, probably. But looking at the designs, I don't really see where the Scar is superior to this in either quality, durability, reliability, any of that. And I would say that the Bren has some things the Scar doesn't. For example, a nicer trigger. I don't know. I definitely can understand why. It's not like this is clearly an inferior gun to the Scar. However, the Czech military did have some suggestions. They acquired a few early pre-production models that spring, and after testing them, they came back in May, June of 2010 and requested some changes. One of the bigger ones was internal. They wanted CZ to go from using a pretty standard AR-type 7-lug rotating bolt to a 6-lug bolt, so one less lug, but that meant the other lugs would be slightly larger and thus more durable. They also liked the modular Magwell, but they wanted CZ to put a pin in it, literally, to hold it in place. You can see it there. So they couldn't accidentally slide off in the field. You know, for regular use, for civilian, it's not really needed, but I get it for military, and you can still just drive out the pin to swap Magwells if necessary. They also wanted the stock changed a bit, reinforcing it, making it a little more durable, and it was actually the military's idea to go to what I consider a neat feature for a rifle. These have interchangeable back straps for the pistol grip, so you can put a smaller, large strap on to kind of size it to your hand. So it took CZ a little bit of time to make these changes, but they did. And then in the summer of 2011, the new models were accepted for Czech military service. Here is the Bayonet. very beefy thing. It can also double as a combat knife. In fact, it comes with an extra hilt and crossguard to make it just into a knife. It locks onto a lug under the barrel. And they used a couple of different types of Miopta sight for these. They also issued them with folding iron sights here. Typically a military gun would have side rails, but I just didn't feel like putting them on mine, so I didn't because it's my gun. And yeah, here is the pistol. The initial order from the Czech Army was for 1,250 805A2 carbines. This is what they designated the one with the 277mm 10.9 11-inch barrel. These, of course, would be used primarily for special forces and whatnot. And when operating with NATO ally units, these could be fitted with the AR-15 Magwell. But the big one to buy was the what they designated 805A1 with the 14-inch, which was actually 360mm 14.2-inch barrel. As you see, it supports the bayonet. Has a birdcage flash hider. This was the quote-unquote rifle for just general use issuance. And they would order, initially, 6,700 of these. So an initial production order of over 8,000. And CZ would fulfill this, delivering the last ones in 2013. And from there, a second contract was placed, and on and on. I can't find more up-to-date numbers, but by 2016, over 17,000 were in Czech Republic military service, and it was said back in 2014 that Slovakia too was retiring its VZ-58s and going to the Bren. But there's not been a lot of news since that time. Another neat feature that I mentioned is that the stock is actually quick detachable. It dovetails on. Any of you who have a Scorpion know the system. Little spring-loaded button back there. And that means it can be easily slid off to make it extremely, well, not extremely, but compacted for transport or replacing the stock. There's actually two different styles of military stock for these. This is the more modern style. There's a earlier, more simplified one as well, and this has a removable cheek riser. It's not on it at the moment. Just a neat package. The Czechs have used these in Afghanistan over the years, and as I said at the beginning, this is still their standard issue firearm, or I should, rifle. You know what I mean. The gun holds open on an empty mag with either Magwell. One complaint people said it doesn't have an external mag or bolt release control. That is true. When you have a empty mag in, it doesn't. This is actually a holdover and something initially requested by the Czech military, so it had a very similar manual of arms to the VZ58. The thing is, to release the bolt, just move it back about 1 millimeter once you take the mag out and it goes forward. It's not a big deal. The bolt handle is very easy to swap to either side. Just pull it back to the notch, pull it out, put it back on the other side. Some complain that it's reciprocating. I will only listen to them if they also complain that the charging handle reciprocates on the SCAR, because it does. Otherwise, la 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 la. Frankly, as an someone who's used to AKs, it's not a problem. There are benefits and detractions to both reciprocating and non-reciprocating handles. Really, the biggest benefit to reciprocating is just simple, and it gives you direct control of the bolt. The gas system is adjustable. And it's very easy to get access to your gas piston and tube. I would, in my opinion, say easier to get to than on the SCAR. That's just me. I also have always really liked the triggers in these. They're just very nice for being military. They're metal, not polymer. They have ambidextrous mag releases, ambidextrous safeties. They come with iron sights, quite good ones. The pistol comes with the same kind of low profile fixed sights as the Scorpion. Has a rotating forward back here, so very pistol style sights. The front's just a post. The carbines, though, come with folding sights that are pretty well copied from like a Magpul M-Bus Pro. But they're nice for backup sights. When in an era when a lot of guns don't even come with backup sights, and those that do, they're just the cheap polymer they can get. I always thought it was nice that CZ shipped with actual usable sights on both guns. The pistols, with their 11-inch barrels, are military in the sense that they're threaded 14x1 left-hand AK, but they come with this muzzle brake. This was actually a brake designed by CZ, although not adopted by the Czech military. Instead, the Czechs just went to a simple birdcage flash hider. On both military guns, the threads are 14x1 left-hand. For the civilian guns, when they did the Carbine in 2016, they changed the thread pattern to AR-15 standard 1/2x28. I know why they did it. I don't blame them. But as a military collector and purist, I really like the original threads. And that's what ultimately led me to change the barrel to the original 14.2 and then make an extension. I didn't want to SBR it for that, so just made this work. The barrels are actually quite easy to change out. CZ doesn't advertise the fact a whole lot, but there are screws. You just remove 6 of them, and the whole barrel, gas, lower rail, everything just slides right out. And you can just slide a new one in, like I did with this one. It takes maybe 5 minutes, 10 tops. And even kind of nicer, they supply the correct wrench right there in the toolkit that these ship with. So I just think that's kind of neat. Not that they really supplied a lot of extra barrels, but it's a feature. If you don't need it, don't use it. But I did happen to need it, and I was appreciative. Same goes with the Magwell. These all originally shipped with the AR-15 Magwell. I understand why they did it. Good decision. And it is a military spec Magwell. So, no problem there. But they also made available the original Magwell kit on their website briefly, where you could buy the Magwell that came with 5 brand new mags for I think $150 shipped. And those of us that are purists almost all bought these. Is it more reliable? No, not really. It's definitely more of a military collector and just kind of cool factor thing. But why not? It's always nice to have something a little unique and different, right? And put a little stubby foregrip on it. Why not? The pistols come with this metal end cap, but they make an arm brace adapter, or if you want to SBR it, the stock assembly will go right on. Just obey all NFA crap. So yeah, what else? What else can I say about the 805 Bren? Introduced in 2011 in the Czech military and still in service in 2020. Introduced as a semi-auto here in 2015, but already pulled out of production by 2018, 2019. So, I guess gone, but for Jay and I, definitely not forgotten. Bren. A bit ironically, while recording this video this afternoon, a gentleman called to ask me questions about a different, actually it might be this one I took pictures of, anyway, an 805, and which I'd prefer, the 805 or the Bren 2 MS. And as you know, Jay and I love the MS. As we've said in several videos, we've compared these. But the reason we haven't just sold our 805 S1s, the Bren 2 is not 100% categorically better. The 805 does still have a few things in its favor. We both feel that the trigger is nicer on the S1. We also feel that people malign it for its heavy weight. But that also has the side effect of being very soft, smooth, and gentle shooting. I'm not saying the 2 is jumpy or bad, but the 1 is a little bit softer, sleeker, nicer to shoot. And for people interested in rail space, you do have more real estate than on the default 2MS. I mean, you can add extensions on those, but I mean, as they come, there's a little more handguard space for rails. So it's not just a completely one-sided thing. I'm not blaming CZ for discontinuing this one when they had a newer version out, because this kind of did fly under the radar. And it was in a very heavily populated market of other 223, 556 piston guns. But much like with the Beretta ARX 100, a lot of people didn't begin to appreciate it until they couldn't get it anymore. And while it is not perfect, I think a lot of its shortcomings really have been overblown. And more importantly, I think a lot of people have just kind of dismissed it as a SCAR clone. Not only is it not a SCAR clone, I think it is superior to the SCAR. And again, more of these have seen military service than the SCAR has. The SCAR Heavy has seen some limited success, but the SCAR L, the SCAR Light, the SCAR 16 really kind of flopped, if you want to be honest. Whereas the 805 Bren received official adoption. Now, that's really only been Czech Republic and Slovakia. Mexico and I believe Indonesia have purchased some, but the lion's share of production have gone to the Czech government, and I'm sure police. The Bren 2, sometimes erroneously called the 806, first started to appear, at least in concept, in late 15, and by 2017 started to kind of supplant the 805, and of course these days that's pretty much everyone's talking about. And all things taken together, it is a superior gun. But so what? A lot of my guns in my collection are not superior, aren't the best. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy them. Guns don't have to be the best to just enjoy them. And the fact is, we both find the 805 a really fun shooter. And I really like the look of it. It has kind of a new retro. I mean, it is very early 21st century, which is getting on to be 15 years old now. It has a certain design element. And while I like the Bren 2, it loses a bit of that uniqueness that the 805 still retains. Bren 2 is starting to kind of look like every other modern gun design to some extent, if you know what I mean. Yeah, there's just a lot about these that I think people aren't aware of. So, we've done quite a few other videos. You can check those out. But I wanted to show the pistol while I had one available and compare it with my 14-incher. That's really the difference, just a couple extra inches of barrel. That's why I don't own both a pistol and a rifle. If there were more differences like handguard length or something, I probably would. But with only 3 inches difference in barrel, and considering the money these cost and always have, I just can't quite justify it, as much as I do like them. But on the other hand, since I have a 14-inch 805, that's why my Bren 2 is an 11-inch. Kind of balances out. As far as I know, the Czech military hasn't used the shorter 8/9 inchers for the Bren 2, but I could be wrong. But yeah, don't forget about this gun. I don't know how many were imported. I don't know that CZ's ever really released that information. They were good guns. They were made the Czech military specifications, and if some of the features and choices the Czechs made in 2009, 2010 don't agree with Americans in 2020, well, that's just kind of how it is. But this is what the military wanted, so this is what CZ delivered. And pretty good success. I mean, it got them to finally move away from their beloved VZ58, so that has to say something. Now, of course, like any military, there are some that said they should have just kept the VZ58. There's always that camp, and it's a good gun, but you can't deny the fact that the VZ58 is 1950s technology. And this is 21st century. So if you ever get a chance to shoot an 805 Bren, go for it. They're really enjoyable guns. They're a true military issue gun. They're a true import. I didn't mention that, but the pistols are 100% imported parts, including the barrel. The rifles do have to have a few U.S. parts from CZ USA thrown in for compliance, but that's really no big thing. These are legit, as far as it goes. And if you'd like to know more, we've done quite a few videos, including on the Bren 2, of course, 2S and MS. And if you'd like to just talk Brens, feel free to post in the comments below. And with that, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha, and we'll both catch you very soon next time.